The dominant scientific consensus views consciousness as a byproduct of complex neural activity, the ghost in the biological machine. This model relies on a specific assumption that human thought is a computable process, a series of algorithmic steps that could, in theory, be replicated by a sufficiently powerful computer. That assumption encountered a mathematical barrier in 1931. Kurt Gödel's incompleteness theorems proved that any formal logical system contains truths that the system itself cannot prove. Human mathematicians can perceive the truth of these statements through intuition, a capacity that exceeds purely algorithmic logic. This suggests the brain functions through a mechanism that classical computation cannot explain. Physicist Roger Penrose argues that because human understanding is non-computable, the underlying physics of the brain must be non-computable as well, leading him to look toward the intersection of quantum mechanics and gravity. A separate inquiry into the nature of understanding emerged from a second-century discovery in the Egyptian desert. The Nag Hammadi library, including the Gospel of Mary, preserved a suppressed epistemological tradition that emphasized direct, internal knowing over external doctrine. Both the Gnostic tradition and Penrosian physics treat consciousness as a foundational substrate of the universe, existing prior to the organization of physical matter. By mapping the variables of Penrose's orchestrated objective reduction theory onto Gnostic cosmology, we can see if these two frameworks describe the same physical and philosophical reality. If the structural details of modern quantum gravity align with these ancient mystical texts, our current understanding of biological emergence may be upside down. Standard neuroscience focuses on the gaps between neurons. The theory of orchestrated objective reduction looks inside them, at the internal protein lattice known as microtubules. Microtubules function as quantum orchestrators. They isolate specific proteins called tubulin dimers, allowing them to enter a state of superposition where they exist in multiple configurations simultaneously. This creates the measurement problem. In standard quantum theory, a wave function only settles into a single, definite state when it is measured by an external observer. Penrose proposes that the collapse happens spontaneously when a superposition reaches a gravitational threshold. He calls this objective reduction, and argues that this specific event generates a discrete moment of conscious experience. This threshold is governed by the equation E equals h bar over t. The variable E represents the gravitational self-energy of the superposition. This links the timing of a conscious moment directly to the fine-scale geometry of spacetime. The brain coordinates millions of these microscopic collapses per second. This orchestration transforms isolated quantum flickers into the continuous stream of awareness we experience. Because these events occur at the Planck scale, Penrose suggests they are guided by values, mathematical or aesthetic truths, embedded in the fundamental structure of the universe. In this model, the brain functions as a quantum interface, filtering and processing information that resides at the Planck scale. Centuries before Penrose, a similar structural framework was recorded by Gnostic thinkers in Upper Egypt. Gnosticism posits that the material world is a restrictive construct created by a lower, ignorant entity called the demiurge, governed by rigid, deterministic laws. While tradition often casts Mary Magdalene as a marginal follower, these texts present her as a master of Gnostic philosophy, the primary teacher of the path to inner knowing. In the Gospel of Mary, she describes the soul's journey upward, a narrative of navigating past a series of gatekeepers known as the archonic powers. These powers represent the constraints of the physical world, fear, ignorance, and the laws of the material cage that prevent the mind from seeing base reality. Beyond these barriers lies the Pleroma, or fullness. This is a non-material realm of pure information and absolute truth that exists prior to physical matter. To reach the Pleroma, one must awaken the divine spark, an inherent faculty within the human mind that provides a direct link to the source. This spark allows for an unmediated perception of truth, explicitly removing the need for external religious authority or physical intermediaries. This direct internal knowing, called gnosis, mirrors the non-computable understanding Penrose identified in mathematical logic. The Gnostic texts function as a manual for bypassing material determinism to interact with a fundamental pre-physical reality. Placing these two models side by side reveals specific structural correspondences. The observable, deterministic world of classical physics is the realm of the demiurge. Both frameworks define the physical reality we perceive as a secondary, derivative state of existence governed by fixed laws. The liminal state of the quantum superposition maps to the barriers of the archons. These represent a space of unresolved potentiality that must be crossed or collapsed to reach the underlying truth. Penrose's Planck-scale Platonic realm is the Gnostic Pleroma. Both are described as realms of pure, non-computable information that provide the foundational structure for everything below them. The objective reduction event is the activation of the divine spark. Both represent the specific experiential bridge that connects the human mind to the absolute reality at the base of the universe. This mapping offers a physical mechanism for consciousness that integrates it into the laws of physics, circumventing the traditional paradoxes of biological emergence. It suggests that a formal framework for quantum consciousness was preserved for nearly 2,000 years, framed as theological mysticism. The synthesis of these two perspectives points towards significant cosmological implications. This framework incorporates Penrose's concept of retroactivity, suggesting that conscious events at the Planck scale may influence the prior physical states of the systems that host them. Matter and biological evolution appear here as the mechanisms by which a fundamental universal consciousness explores its own potential and manifests in the physical world. This places the human observer in a central role within the structure of the cosmos. Observation serves as a necessary component in the transition from quantum potentiality to the definite facts of physical reality. This active participation in reality building is the core of the Magdalene tradition, the realization of extreme internal spiritual authority. In this model, human experience occupies a central role rather than being an accidental byproduct of a mechanical nature. The universe requires the presence of consciousness to collapse its own potentiality into a singular, actualized existence. In this view, the existence of the physical universe depends on the presence of consciousness to transform what could be into what is. Every choice made by a conscious mind is a fundamental cosmological event.